Hello and welcome to the Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker Red Mage guide. My name is Julia and I'll be covering the ins and out of the Red Mage job at level 90. Alongside Black Mage and Summoner, Red Mage is a magical range DPS, often referred to as a caster. The Red Mage job revolves around casting spells from range and building up mana, which then can be spent on a melee combo executed with their rapier. The job brings great utility through instant cast raises and potent damage mitigations. The way Red Mage works is that certain spells in your rotation generate black mana whilst others generate white mana. This mana can be spent on your combo actions, where you run into melee range to perform a huge burst of damage. The job gauge simply keeps track of these two resources for you. It is important to keep these two mana bars in balance with each other, because if one of them is considerably more filled than the other, you start generating less mana and in turn will be able to perform less melee bursts. Before explaining all of the abilities you can cast, I want to talk about your passive ability. If your rotation is bread, then Juliacare is butter. Juliacare makes every other spell you cast instant. The way it does this is by granting you a 15-second buff, similar to Swift Cast. That makes your next spell require no cast time. Jolt is our filler and the start of our rotation. If we have nothing else to cast, we cast this. The spell has a short cast time and generates an equal amount of black and white mana. Thunder 3 and Vero 3 are harder hitting spells with longer cast times. They generate 6 mana each, but only for their respective color. Thunder grants black mana, whilst Vero grants white mana. They also have a chance to grant you Fire or Stone ready. These can be spent on Fire or Stone. These are two abilities with a short cast that also grant mana for their respective color. Prioritize whether you cast Vero or Thunder based on what procs you do not yet have. These 5 spells are our main way of building black and white mana. Once we reach 50 of each, we can spend it on our melee combo. The combo starts with Enchanted Riposte, Enchanted Juliacare, and Enchanted Redoublement. Start with Riposte and then use Juliacare, and finally Redoublement. If executed in the correct order, and when started at 50-50 mana, you will now gain access to Flare and Holy. These two spells replace Thunder and Vero on your hotbar and are hard-hitting abilities that generate mana for their respective colors. They, like Fire and Stone, also have a chance to generate Fire and Stone ready. This chance is a low 20%, however is increased to 100% if the associated color has less current mana than the other color. Once cast, you will now gain access to Scourge, an even harder hitting spell that replaces the Jolt spell on your hotbar. Lastly, once cast, you gain access to Resolution. This spell also replaces Jolt on your hotbar. Congratulations, you have now successfully done a melee combo, and with the earlier 5 mentioned mana generating spells, you now know the core of the rotation. There is one spell which I haven't mentioned yet, which is Enchanted Reprise. This spell consumes 5 white mana and black mana to do a small amount of damage. You can use this to keep uptime if caught in a dire situation. However, with our large number of movement options, you should be able to avoid wasting mana on this ability. Naturally, there is more to Red Mage, and we have access to a number of cooldowns and OGCDs we need to use correctly. The first of these is Flashe and Contrasixt. These two abilities send a number of etheric swords towards your target and do a hefty chunk of damage. Outside of your opener, simply use these abilities on cooldown. Corpse is a gap closer. Using this ability, you rush towards the boss with your rapier, dealing a moderate amount of damage. Because it does damage, it is important to use this ability on cooldown. Luckily, it can hold 2 stacks, allowing you to hold onto 1 stack during movement, where you wouldn't want to dash into the boss and simply use it afterwards without overcapping. Engagement functions similar to Corpse, however, it does not displace your character. You do, however, have to be in melee range to perform this ability. Also use this ability on cooldown. This cooldown it shares with Displacement. Displacement is the exact opposite of Corpse. Instead of gap closing, it lets you perform a backflip away from the boss to create distance. This backflip is rather sizable and sometimes can actually kill you by putting you into a death wall or dangerous AoEs like P2S. Therefore, it is recommended to spend the cooldown of this ability using engagement, and only ever use displacement if you need to create distance between the boss and yourselves, and if you know that it won't kill you in doing so. Acceleration allows the next Thunder-free, Vero-free or Impact to be cast instantly. As Acceleration gives a proc, you should aim to use this when you do not have a proc up, but if necessary to use for movement, it is better to use that than to let your GCD drift or to use Reprise. Manification instantly grants us 50 mana of both white and black color. It also grants us the Manification buff, making the next 6 GCD spells and actions deal 5% more damage for 15 seconds. This ability has a 110 second cooldown, which can cause some confusion on whether we should hold it for raid buffs coming up in 10 seconds, or if we should just use it straight away. The answer is that in fights with unknown kill times, it is better to simply use it on cooldown outside of buffs and potentially gain another usage out of Manification. If you know that this will not result in an extra usage, then it's better to hold and use under raid buffs. Swift Cast is an ability that allows our next spell to be instant cast, similar to dual cast. Lastly, we have Embolden. This is our raid buff. It grants all party members within 15 yalms of you a buff that increases all their damage dealt by 5%. It grants us a buff that increases specifically only our magic damage by 5%. We use Flashe and Contra 6 simply on cooldown, and we do not have to use these for buff windows. This is because our buff windows only buff our magic damage, which Flashe and Contra 6 do not do. The opener goes as follows. We pre-pull with Thunder and use a dual cast from that on Verero. Within the first GCD, we use Acceleration and Swift Cast into another Thunder. Here, we use our Potion and another Thunder. In this GCD, we use Embolden and Manification before starting our melee combo. Under Riposte A, use Flashe, and under Schwarzhau, use Contra 6. Under Redoublement, use Corpse Corpse and Engagement, and then we use For Holy with another Corpse Corpse and Engagement. Finally, we use both Scorch and Resolution. The opener uses 2 Thunders even if you have a proc, because having higher black mana will guarantee a proc from Verholy, so you always end up with both procs after your combo. Here's an example of the opener being done. When you enter an encounter with several targets, you can start using your AoE abilities. On 2 targets, you still want to use Jolt, but you use your dual cast on Impact, assuming Impact hits both targets. Melee combo remains unchanged at 2 targets, but do try to align Resolution to hit both targets. Starting from 3 targets onwards, you want to replace Jolt with Thunder 2 and Verero 2, and use Acceleration on Impact. For your melee combo, start using Enchanted Molinet 3 times before using Verholy or for Flare, Scorch, and finally Resolution. Like mentioned in the intro, Red Mage brings a great amount of utility to the party in the form of powerful damage mitigations and a large amount of instant cast raises. A good Red Mage can make progression a breeze and allows your party to more easily recover from mistakes. Let's talk about these spells. Cure is a spell we can use to heal ourselves or a targeted ally. It is worth noting that this spell isn't really worth using, as it results in us losing a lot of DPS and mana for our melee combos. Only use the spell if there are moments where your healers are otherwise occupied or dead, and there is dire need for a single target heal on one of your party members. Doing this properly requires a very fast reaction time and a constant attention to your party's well-being, which can make less experienced players perform worse. Only consider using this ability if this won't be an issue for you and only if the situation is dire enough. For Raise is our resurrection spell. In combination with dual cast, we can essentially use an instant cast Raise every other GCD. This allows us to keep progressing for a notably longer time and allows us to help our party members more easily recover from mistakes by not straining our healer's mana and time. The damage loss from raising someone over doing normal damage is minor, as long as it's done outside of our combo, which means you should be trying to help your healers out by raising when they're busy. Magic Barrier is your first damage mitigation ability. It reduces the magic damage taken by all party members in a 15 Yalm radius by 10%, and it also increases HP recovering from healing actions by an additional 5%. This ability is insanely good for moments where your healers are really struggling to keep the party alive as raid-wide damage is being thrown out, especially if said damage is magical. A good example of one of these moments is Final Curtain in P4S Part 2. Aside from these specific job utility action, Red Mage also gains access to caster specific actions. The first one is Addle. This ability functions similarly to Magic Barrier. However, instead of a raid bite buff, it's a single target debuff that, when applied, lowers the physical damage done by the target by 5% and the magic damage done by the target by 10%. This is a powerful tool to use to make raid bites less potent, which can save a lot of your healer's mana. Coordinate where you want these used with your static healers. Next is Lucid Dreaming. This ability grants you mana points over the course of 21 seconds. Use this to recover from any deaths or if your mana is about to be depleted. Sure Cast is your knockback immunity and prevents your cast from being interrupted from taking damage that would otherwise interrupt it. And lastly, Sleep puts the target to sleep and all the enemies in a 5 Yalm ring around it as well for 30 seconds. Any damage done to these targets does break the spell. This spell does not really see any usage outside of niche content like Palace of the Dead, and if you're really struggling for hotbar space, this is the first spell I recommend you unbind. Since acceleration is able to stack up twice, you can hold this ability without overcapping to more easily deal with upcoming movement and maintain your GCD uptime. Our OGCD abilities all have cooldowns that are multiples of 5 seconds. This makes it so our cooldowns neatly come off during the instant cast part from dual cast. That said, our melee combo doesn't align with this rhythm, so we can use one acceleration or swift cast during each of our melee combos to realign the instant cast part from dual cast with the cooldowns of our OGCDs. Since our melee combos only use 50 white and black mana, we can easily store up a melee combo for our buff windows without overcapping either of the mana bars. Doing this will increase our damage significantly and is worth doing so. Entering buff windows, we can fit 2 sets of finishers by doing 2 melee combos and using Embolden after the first redoublement. You can time this by starting 5 seconds before Embolden is available. If you did not use Manification on cooldown, you will need 50-50 mana to accomplish this. Otherwise, you must have at least 81 of one mana and 92 of the other. Since our potion is 30 seconds long, we are able to fit in 3 melee combos under it. To pull this off, start your first melee combo around 17 seconds prior to Embolden coming off cooldown. Use the potion before buffs during your first melee combos just before Scourge. Then enter your second melee combo and use Embolden after redoublement. This only is possible if you enter the burst window with 73 black and white mana and that you have Manification ready to use between the first and second combo. Overcapping mana slightly whilst doing this is okay. You can hold Manification for the 2-minute buff window to guarantee free combos under pot burst. Do note that this is not worth if it'll end up costing you a usage of pot or Manification. So only do this if potting at 2 minutes is optimal and you do not end up losing a Manification cost. Vercure can be used during downtime to grant a proc of dual cast, so we can use an instant cast spell when the boss becomes targetable again. Our stat priority is as follows: crit over determination over direct hit. Most of the time, higher item level pieces are better than lower item pieces, regardless of the substat they hold. That said, the job does start to fall apart when you reach higher numbers of spell speed. The general advice is to go for higher item level items as long as you do not go below 2.46 GCD. It is still worth using the gear calculator linked in the description to double check whether an item is an upgrade or not. You may be thinking, what about spell speed? Spell speed is by far Red Mage's least preferred substat, and we have a lot of damage unaffected by spell speed. While a small amount of spell speed is fine, we generally prefer to avoid slotting excessive spell speed. This guide is made with no particular tier in mind, so for your current best in slot list, please visit the Balance Discord's Red Mage resource channels. This will list the items you're aiming to obtain. Lastly, I want to talk about a few smaller notes that I didn't believe fit in any of the previous categories. If you have higher ping, you might have issues double weaving or weaving after your combo abilities. This makes the job perform significantly worse. However, there are ways to deal with this. For PC users, you can use NoClippy or FFXIV Alexander to increase the spell queue window. For both PC users and console users, you can use a VPN to get a better route to the server, possibly reducing your ping that way. For more information, check the Balance Discord. XIV analysis is a useful tool to help you analyze your rotation. Simply put in your FF logs report to see what you can improve upon. I recommend using this frequently whilst learning the job.